Hi, welcome to a stream. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Haven't been able to do too many on Xibalba or Cosmonarchy or anything like that. But we are going to be doing one on a new title, a new game, because I can't stop making games, or at least making game design documentation. So we'll go into it here, but this is Onitar, the Pretense of War. It is not set in Xibalba, so that takes some of the pressure off of us, because obviously one of the things that I want out of Xibalba is sort of like the seminal masterpiece, the masterwork, the sort of thing that you would want to give it your all on. And I was okay with the idea of iterating over time on something that is ultimately supposed to be really good, but it was just a very large project to work on for our first game. And if we wanted funding for that, and I didn't want to have to go and work, some less exciting job, or something that would take a lot of effort away from me, attention away from this, then I was going to have to come up with some way of funding the whole company. So I have decided it makes sense to do a smaller scale game. So we'll have a demo out sometime in a couple months, basically. And the main idea is you got a MOBA style control scheme, but you don't have prefab heroes. You play as something called an avatar, and avatars get all of their stats and abilities through items. Although they will have some base stats, but I don't exactly know what those will be yet. So you don't have anything, like anything you do in this game, other players can do, because it's literally just a fashion of equipment. So we'll have a more involved equipment system, inventory system, similar to Diablo, or some of those other ARPG games that you may have played before, where there's like a head slot and a hand slot and an offhand slot and stuff like that. So you'll actually have the opportunity to customize, and that means that if you buy a weapon item, then it actually does change your attack. So if anybody here has played League of Legends or knows of the game, it would be like if you bought the BF sword, it actually gave you a BF sword that you could use to attack people in melee with, and it changed your attack. That's basically what we're going for here. Which means we'll have a lot more depth to the item system, and also means that we'll have a lot of fun with like items that are of a higher tier or level than a previous one. We're not going to bother with leveling up, having level systems or anything like that, because obviously those just add another layer of scaling. I would like to keep the whole game essentially about two things in terms of scaling power. And one of those things is something the avatars themselves do as, they get as rewards, which is items. And the other thing is the state of strength of your AI ally. So all avatars, no matter which team they're on, will have an obsidian, which is sort of a computerized super intelligence, and it runs the base that is happening. So it's sort of like an RTS style player. There's only going to be one resource, and there's going to be a lot of other elements that are kind of stripped down and basic about the RTS gameplay of this. And that is entirely because I don't ever expect, maybe it'll be possible for a human player to play as an Obsidian in like a custom game or something. I'm not going to like restrict that. But it's not designed for human players. Like, it's designed to be this literal artificial intelligence that can micro like thousands of units and, run a million simultaneous tasks. So the idea of a human trying to do that is obviously untenable, I think, especially as the scale goes on. So we'll get into all the specifics. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not an easy game to elevator pitch. If I had to distill it down into an elevator pitch, it would be you're playing with MOBA control schemes. All your progression comes from items. You fight alongside a very involved AI ally that runs an entire RTS-style base. But saying all of that just makes you wonder, like, what? How? What kind of question? Like, there's so many other things that you'd have to do, like, how big are the maps? Are there more than one map? All this other stuff. So we'll get into that, but that's the premise. And if you want to take a look at it yourself, you can take a look at it, fraudsclub.com/Onitar, Onitar. A word of note on the name. In a moment, I have to take a sip. So, I did not, I chose this name for a reason. The subtitle being The Pretense of War is very much obviously a little dig at the fact that this is going to be a smaller scale game than anything else we produce, because scale is kind of what we like to do around here. So the Pretense of War is almost like, if you know what the word pretense means, it kind of gives you the sort of symbology in your head that you're thinking like, oh, this is supposed to be like a little teaser, or we're kind of almost pretending that this is the scale of a war, and it'll still be a fairly reasonable scale game. Like the way that I described it is that it has a backdrop which achieves the middling scale of the average RTS, which is probably underselling it a little bit. It'll probably be the same scale as Cosmonarchy Brood War, which is, I think, higher scale than most RTS games. But in my head, that's like an average scale game, because I'm also working with the mental image of what Cosmonarchy Retail will turn into and what Dreamhold will have and all this other stuff. So, actually, it's important to bring up Dreamhold, because Dreamhold is obviously the more like 2D action roguelike style game where you have a twin stick controls instead of more conventional MOBA controls. So Onitar differs from Dreamhold in a couple of key avenues. The control scheme is a big one, but also how involved you are in setting the stage. Dreamhold, you're a lot more involved in that, and it's very theatrical in terms of its the entire setup, right? Your character is called a thespian, and you're doing performances, right? And you're setting the stage for your ally to show up and start building stuff, and all that shit. So there's a lot of like differences in the theme and how that's engaged. Obviously, Dreamhold set in Xibalba, so that's like another example of it being different. But in general, some of the key differences here are that like Onitar is meant to be a smaller scale game. It's going to be a nice little way to put the engine through its paces, and I did discuss this in a recent channel map. So if you watched that, you already know this is the sort of game I was alluding to. And yeah, it's nice to actually have it documented. So we do indeed have a bit of a roadmap, and the first thing I'm going to do on this stream, now that I've explained what Onitar is, I'm going to fire up the roadmap and actually write it into the documentation here. And I still need to update the game flow. Like it's a little bit first draft, basically. All this stuff is very, very early draft. The stuff in the scratchpad is eventually going to be described in dedicated sections where I'll have like an entity classes a section that goes over the game elements, and then there's like stuff like this, and there'll be more things that I add probably. But ultimately, we're not really looking at stuff that's going to be massively different than what you see in the scratchpad. Like it'll be different in the context of it being more fleshed out. There's more text to read about these individual items, but I don't think we need to add more items than what we already have. And that's actually a refreshing aspect of the game, of this game's development, is that I kind of know everything that I need to know just by looking at this, which is pretty nice. So I'll take it. We need a battle royale, MMORPG, cookie clicker equivalents, and we will have the whole market cornered. I still don't really get cookie clickers, to be honest. I guess those are like idle phone games or something. If I decided to do a phone game, it does go against a lot of what I would actually want to do. Like what I believe makes for an entertaining game. But obviously, like I know this is a jest message anyway, but to take the premise seriously, if we wanted to do something like that, like I've had tons of ideas for open world games, which you could classify as MMORPGs. And I don't know if I've had ideas for battle royales, but I could probably do a battle royale mode for something like Heaven Sent, which is the name of our FPS. By the way, I didn't announce that anywhere, but I did indeed name the FPS. You can see some information about it has been added to the meta page, which I guess I should update the last updated to take note of. Oops. Where are we? Let's do... Where am I even supposed to go here? Meta. Ah, Jesus. Last updated, it was, what, 2 days ago? So 13 of... There you go. That'll be updated next time I do something. Phone game of Find the Zerg here. Dude, I found a Zerg here. It's Mute as Dozen. How you doing, bro? Hope you're doing well. Clickatar, the pretense of an auto-clicker. Okay. See, we got comedians in the chat. I've never been too crazy about turn-based games. So my brother and I did play a turn-based game. He can attest to this since he's in the chat. My brother and I did do some turn-based shit with me, where we played a game, Divinity. Or I think it was Original Sin, but it might have been one of the other games, and we played it co-op on console, which is like not what you would expect. The game really shouldn't have been turn-based. You like there was no reason for it to be turn-based. It felt like it was, even though there was a lot of like systems involved or whatever, it felt like it was almost an afterthought. Like I could easily imagine the game just being real time and then being like 100 times more engaging. But yeah, you if you walked up to like a broken crate or something and clicked it, your character would say, "This seems to be broken," which is like a perfect fucking voice clip to play over the entire game because it was a giant disaster. Um, but I do recall there was one really funny moment where we walked into an area that was an obvious gotcha, and it was just there were like a billion. I can describe them as like skeletal versions of Ziggs from League of Legends, where they're like literal bombs, or like there's tiny things carrying giant bombs. And my brother had tripped the trap, so I was far away, and so I just shot one of them, and literally the entire screen blew up, and we like it was a solid like 30 seconds of particle lag, and he died, and then I revived him. That was the story. Oh, teleport a box onto someone's head in combat. I forgot about that. That still one of the funnier moments of our playthrough of that game was when I was like, I know what I'm doing, okay? I'm a professional. And then I walked into like a trap that froze me or incinerated me or something. It was like perfect comedic timing, and I had no idea of knowing. Because like good luck actually seeing where traps are. I mean, I know that that's the point. They are traps, but still. What's up, Chalks? We're talking about Divinity Original Sin because basically, if you read back up in the chat, like Knight of the Realm was talking about turn-based tactics games and how they could fit on mobile. Because I was basically trying to go through the mental gymnastics of being like, if I had to make a mobile game, what would I actually make? And because the platform seems like a joke to me, because I actually want like engaging gameplay. So I guess I probably would I'd need to do like a puzzler or a turn-based game or like a story game or something. I would need to do something that's not like a conventional real-time experience. Should play that game again just for the comedy. I think the problem came from us not being able to progress at some point, but I can't remember. I can't remember why we stopped playing it, but it was just, I know it was a grind. I know there was a lot of issues where we would just like have to backtrack because it's real time until it's like one of those like Pokemon or whatever. It's a real time until you actually meet an enemy. And yeah, Divinity Original Sin had co-op. We played it couch co-op on console. It was a disaster. You got to know that at the walking speed and that everything was RNG in combat. Yeah, well, can you blame me? It was 100% RNG. It's really stupid. You can attach controllers to phones now. Yeah, and then there's the Steam Deck or whatever. Stream playing Divinity Original Sin 2 together. I have told my brother we should just stream some of the shit that we do because when we play like some game like Payday 2 or whatever, it's just comical. I don't think either of us have. What do I even have for games? I've been playing Halo Master Chief Collection, and the remaster looks so ugly for the first game. Let's search Divinity. I have Beyond Divinity, Divine Divinity, and Divinity 2 Developer's Cut. These are all from like 1865 though, so neither of those are the games that I've. Yeah, imagine paying $45 for a game that doesn't even work. It'll be one of those rare games where it'll go on sale for $2 later, maybe. What's up, Luciferius? The meta right now is all about RNG and like creating explosions if you headshot someone after reloading in the last 3 seconds. Wait, what the fuck? Is that like the phone meta you mean? Wait, my brother said that I own Divinity Original Sin 2, but I don't. I thought I did. I was pretty sure I did. But I don't. Yeah, if our stream gets really big, then you take half the profits, bro. That'll pay back at least $2. Yeah, that synthetic game. My brother and I were also playing that quite a bit, and it was another one of those games where it was kind of a meme. It's you made in Game Maker, and you in co-op you just like randomly lag for a solid minute, and that can kill you, obviously, or not a minute, a solid second and a half or something. I don't know anything about Aliens Fireteam. I mean, it really depends. I think you can just ignore some enemies and go to fight people, but I can't remember that much about it, to be honest. Not a very memorable product. So we'll do roadmap. Let's do that. And for this, I will take a look at the Antikythera roadmap thing. Okay, this is how I did this. The Payday 2 lag experience we had. When did we lag in that? Oh, yeah, you're talking about like when we were in the No Mercy mission, I think. We were in the hospital, and we were... it was like 1 FPS or something. Yeah, Nova Drift is okay. It's just... like, it's got an interesting gameplay set and progression. The problem is it doesn't actually have content yet. Like, the enemies are really boring. The bosses are really boring. Some of the loadouts are kind of annoying because a lot of it is done. You have basically there's RNG to decide which items you can pick, and then you can re-roll to get another set. But you have limited re-rolls, and then like not everything is even good. Like because the gameplay loop involves you shooting until you level up, and then pausing the entire game to get an upgrade. Which I don't really know how they would decouple those two things. You basically your lizard brain is like, let me play some more. Quick, just pick any fucking upgrade. And then like obviously you might pick something that's not ideal. Or you don't want to like spend like 8 years hitting R to reload. So I think that's probably the biggest problem with the game. Then you also have like the enemies being bad, and then the general lack of content. So you end up feeling kind of meandering. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Chalks, I like the idea of roguelikes, except I really hate random shit impacting my like the ability for me to actually do something. Like if it's something like so I'll tell you guys a little bit about the plans that I have. So in Dreamhold, there's going to be these sort of side missions that you can do. I forget what the verbiage I used for them. Maybe I have it documented somewhere. Let's do. Let's see. I don't think I have it anywhere here, but basically, you can do performances whenever you're around sufficient enemies, and that's your audience. And if you kill them all, then you get some sort of like, there's some sort of benefit to it. However, there will be dedicated areas where you can do performances for side missions, and the side missions will basically tell you on the map, like when you discover them or when they're revealed to you for some other reason. You can mouse over them on the map, or just see them when you walk into when they're in view. It will tell you what the what the rewards are. So it's randomly selecting some rewards for you to claim, but you can still see them before you even initiate it. Which is like my way of saying, you don't have control over what the rewards are, but you have control of whether or not you want to do it, like whether you think it's actually worthwhile. Which it's not a reroll, obviously, but it's like a way for the player to have the knowledge necessary to not like potentially have their time wasted. Where if somebody on their team can use whatever the rewards are, then maybe you do it. So yeah, bro. In Dreamhold, you play as a thespian, which is a really fancy and slightly cringe word for actor. The whole idea is that it's a very theatrical game. So yeah, it's a little like there's an in-universe reason for the rewards to not be noticeable. Just because like it might the performance might involve like provoking a fucking neutral creature or um eliminating enemies inside a cave and you get treasure. So there might be something that you can't know visually, but I'm still going to give you that information anyway because a functional decision like of the game is that you should be like you should actually be able to do stuff. The other thing too is that in Dreamhold, the whole game is kind of like this is something that I took from Risk of Rain 2, and maybe it was in the first game as well, where the difficulty increases as time goes on. I wanted a fixed way of doing this, and I also wanted this to reset between stages. So the basic way that I had was obviously you get a very natural, organic ramp up to that where you're fighting an RTS enemy, you have an RTS ally. The RTS enemy is going to build up and scale up and get higher tier tech and expand and have larger, avenues or whatever. Like they're going to have more stuff that they can throw at you, basically. So there's that like sort of soft timer where it's like if you wait too long doing side shit, you might like maybe the reward isn't good enough for you to actually defeat your enemy. And then after that, you'll have the opportunity to do something like you basically, in order to exit a stage, you have to defeat what's called a villain, which is basically a boss. And when the boss has been summoned, which there's a couple of different ways that that can happen, you initiate a performance to defeat him. If you're not there though, or if you leave and you withdraw or are defeated and respawn, the villain will eventually just leave his lair and start like organizing an attack, and this can easily turn into a sort of death ball-y scenario where he's got more backup than he would have had otherwise, or different backup or whatever. So that's another way. It's like if the villain is on the map, eventually he's going to gather his strength and move out if you don't go attack him, and so that's an even more poignant timer, basically. Scouting result, that's how you know what rewards are in store. Yeah. I'm not worried about like justifying it in universe. I was just saying that like you could easily make it so that you don't know what's going on, but I feel like that's better for the gameplay. And I also think that balancing these performances in side missions, which may result in many different other things, like there could be any sort of length. You might initiate a sort of arena where a bunch of enemies now appear or flock to you, and stuff like that might happen, right? So that might occur. And then you also get like all these other things, all these other situations that might show up. And so the length of the side mission is probably going to be fairly quick, but then there's also like the time that you spend, going back to the main area or whatever. And basically the end result is you could be spending maybe a minute or two out of commission in terms of contributing to the main offensive. Do you have that time? Like building an understanding and knowledge of like how strong your ally currently is and whether or not they're going to fall and how soon you can get back into action. That's going to be a big part of the game if you choose to complete these side missions. So you almost want to like push towards the enemy, then reveal some side missions and decide whether or not you want to keep going or if you want to break to go and do those side missions. And because you've already gained an advantage, you can afford to sort of like let that attrition back towards like the middle of the map if you're imagining a tug of war scenario. I don't really remember much about Coder, but I know it had a lot of dialogue. I'm not sure how I would do an RPG style game because I would want a lot of real time stuff, and then I would also want the dialogue to be fairly snappy. I'd probably just go for like an ARPG style thing, similar to like Devil May Cry or God of War, but without the bad shit. Okay, so I actually wrote out. No, the bad shit does not include dialogue necessarily. It's just like without a bunch of cutscenes or whatever, or stuff that's gonna take away control. Using aid kit on beta. Thanks. Should have showed that one on stream, actually. This is what Chalks put in the chat. Check it out. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something I haven't studied Mesk's stuff very exhaustively, and he hasn't even, to my knowledge, he hasn't even done a huge amount of work on like publicating his design philosophy on stuff. But I did like his idea for achievements. His idea for achievements were like, you don't even know this happens. You don't have any information that this is an achievement unless somebody tells you. But you get this achievement by beating the entire game without taking a single hit. And I was like, oh yeah, that is actually worthy of the title achievement, you know, like. Whereas like otherwise games just like, oh, you beat this level? Achievement. Oh, you pushed start? Achievement. It's like, all right, fuck you, buddy. Yeah, we're doing a lot of beta healing. So I did write down a rough roadmap earlier, so I'm just consulting that while I write this in. So obviously we need some sort of conceptual stuff, right? So we'll do... And then we have... I guess we don't need it to be bold all the way through. Trying to think about what else we might need. Miscreant bands. And then what else do we need? Oh, we're going to need like map elements. And then I think that's everything that I can think of immediately. So technical. Why? Launch the game achievement. Oh, I did get it like a weird achievement in Halo recently where I was playing the 5th mission, or no, the 4th. Yeah, the 4th mission. And it's the one where you're on a beach and you're finding the control room. Really confusing mission, by the way. I don't know how much the remaster actually changed, but I don't know how I ever beat that campaign in as a kid, because like there you are just directionless a lot of the time. Maybe the old graphics were a little bit easier to read or whatever, or I'm just trying. I actually did get lost especially inside the building there, but the achievement was literally like, don't lose an ally in the opening 5 minutes. It's like, okay, it's not even 5. It's like honestly, it was like a minute. It was a minute-long engagement, and if you don't lose an ally on heroic or legendary difficulty, then you get the achievement. And it's like, there was something very wrong about that when I got that achievement. I was like, hey, this is something that they're actually saying. Like they put this here. It's not obviously there were no achievements in the Xbox One. So they put this here. Like, they deliberately designed this. Like, that's gross. Like, they actually said, I know what we'll do. We'll give the player stupid challenges that don't mean anything. But yeah, designing achievements for breakpoints in, like, a main story or something to that effect would be potentially useful in the way that you described Night of the Realm. You're right about that. I also like how everybody wants, for some reason, people get really, I don't know if this is still the case. There's a weird thing where a lot of people want every Steam game to have trading cards. I don't think I really want trading cards, guys. I'm not gonna lie. That seems like a massive waste of time. What's up, Mage? Happy 30th birthday. You beautiful Korean bastard. Welcome. Unfortunately, I'm forever plagued by Michael Malice. Had Youngmi Park on her on his show. You're welcome. And he's a giant troll for people who don't know. So he opens up the street, like, this person's from North Korea, doesn't, like, that's their extent of, like, they speak English and they speak Korean, right? And he just goes, konnichiwa. And she goes, oh, Michael, I think that's what the Japanese say. Like, she doesn't get it, obviously. Like, how the fuck would anybody get it? Because he goes through this whole ordeal where he's, like, explaining how important she is and how much he respects her, and then just says hello in Japanese. Oh, man. No, trading cards are like... Here, I still have Steam open, so I think I can just... How do I go to my... inventory? I never understood this. Also, it's Chromium, so it'll take 8 years to actually load. I don't know why it even defaulted me to TF2. How do I... Oh, Steam, I think. These are trading cards. Lol. This is worth gems or 5 cents. Which I think gives me 3 cents, because Valve gets 2 cents. But it's not even worth my time to click sell. Oh, it's Leloy. My mistake. Wow, at some point it sold it for 7 cents. Can you believe that? Like, what value does this actually have? Look at this person. Oh shit, my finger. Like, I don't want these. I don't even want to look at them. Pretty stupid. I just don't get why they exist, and I don't really get why I would want to put them in my game. I don't want to support fucking whatever that is. That's how they try to teach people the stock market. Yeah. All right, so let's go back into the technical stuff. What else do we need for these technicalities? So we need inventory system. Oh, I guess that's another thing that I can do here is inventory. I've already done that, but I'll write it down later. We'll also do items next. I didn't know that you could actually download the artwork. Oh, great. Well, I'll be sure to do that. Bump, bump, bump. So we obviously need the inventory system. We need item shops. Bounty boards. And bounties. I haven't really talked about bounties yet, but I'll get into that later. Items are definitely the biggest deal. Bounties really just give you items, or ash, which is the currency. And that is actually the only that's the same resource that your AI ally will use, your obsidian. So should be pretty intuitive there. Oh yeah, and I didn't mention this earlier, but basically the way I hinted at the idea that the RTS factions are going to be the RTS gameplay that the AI plays is going to be somewhat simplified in terms of the macroeconomics. So there's only one resource, which is one simplification. There's also each building only trains one unit. And I think the training will be automatic, so it will cost time but not resources. And so buildings will be the main sort of target, if you will. And that's kind of like, now that I think about that, I didn't really make this observation when I was initially coming up with this concept. But it's very similar to those like StarCraft 2 tug of war games or whatever. I guess Desert Strike and stuff in Brood War as well, where you would build a building, and for every building you had, you would get another one of those units. So I think it was like all gateways give you like one zealot or something. Stuff like that. Game like League would benefit from having item bounties. Have to try and delegate which player gets the bounty based on their build. Is it something like kill a player who has this item, or if you have this item, you get the bounty specifically and have to do something specific with it, I guess? I guess it could be like, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but the first thing I'm thinking of is like, lifesteal, 1,000 life on Bloodthirster or something, which reads more like an achievement or something than a bounty, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be interesting if bounties were a physical thing inside your backpack that couldn't be equipped, which means if you're on a bounty, or if you have a bounty that you've accepted and you die, everything in your backpack can be stolen. So anything that's not equipped on you, right? If you have anything in your backpack, you leave behind like a sack that people can just grab or rifle through, which is kind of similar to Battle Royale rules, if anybody's played those. But it'll take some time to do that, obviously. You'd need to not be in the middle of battle. Kill a player and the bounty reward is the item. Yeah. So bounties will reward you with items as well as like sometimes those early bounties will probably just give you like cash injection basically. But most of the bounties are going to be rewarding items. Like that's the main way. In fact, you can't get max level items through the shops. You have to do them through bounties. So that's like one of the things that you'll do. I'm not sure if you'll spend ash on bounties, like in order to buy them or in order to get them in the first place. It wouldn't really make sense if they're considered bounties because like theoretically, like why would you have to buy it? But I'll figure something out like that. It might be interesting to have like an economy for that, especially if they can be stolen anyway. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be actual inventory management in this game too. So like if you pick up an item and you don't want to use it, but somebody on your team wants it, you can drop it for them. Which I don't think you can do in League. At least I've never seen that happen. I imagine it would it would be yeah, I don't think that's possible. That would be really funny though. I have no idea what Divine Rapier is, Luciferius. I guess I can look it up. Item drops when the wielder dies. Cannot be sold or put in a backpack. Okay. $350 attack damage sounds like a lot, but I don't know. I don't have any frame of reference for that number. In Onitar, you'll have a free 2-second teleport to anything that has any building that your AI ally has constructed, but it will be interrupted by damage. So it sounds really overpowered because there's no cooldown on it, but it's because the maps are going to be huge, so you're going to need to be able to do that. And obviously, you can't do it in the middle of a fight. There's going to be tactical AI for the units, which are called supplicants, like the RTS units, basically, which they will prioritize trying to stop you from teleporting if you're like teleporting in their vision range or something. And then obviously your supplicants will try to block other supplicants from, or even other avatars from blocking from stopping your TP if you're near them. So they try to like gather around you or whatever. Yeah, I think basically what we're gonna do for items in Onitar is just you can put shit in your backpack, and stuff in your backpack drops basically when you die, and you can drop any item manually if you want to. I guess you can only manually drop items in Dota and not in League. Bit weird, but whatever. What else do we have here? We will have a pretty heavy what would you call it? Like, we will have a very heavy focus on player versus environment in this. So, having like avatar AI that actually works well is going to be a key aspect, which is probably a no-brainer for people who've followed games that I've worked on before or content I've worked on before. Basically, unlike in League of Legends or whatever, where like the AI is a pushover and a joke, the AI in Onitar is going to be pretty powerful. If you can pay for other people's items in League, I don't know if there would ever be balance again. Someone would reach his full build from getting 20 kills in 5 minutes. They would pay their team. Yeah. Top laner used to like take basically the jungler used to just be a dedicated secondary support player, and they would like buy Sightstone and stuff. So like that was a thing in like season 5 as well, where you weren't expected to carry through the jungle. You were expected to basically like share XP or something with your, like you would leash the like Gromp, the fucking frog. You would leash that for your top laner, and then go and do like solo blue or something. And so like sustained junglers became really popular because they could survive doing that with late level 1 or whatever. And that was also, I think, the era of like Smite top lane. Like I think it was like TP Smite, where your summoners, and you would build the jungle items that make you whatever the one is that like adds burn damage. I forget what it is, Skirmisher Saber or something, and you just get owned. For most of its history, it was an idiot wrangler, I think. I don't think the 2-second channel is too short. I want to err on the side of giving a ton of mobility. So even like, if you see somebody in your vision range, in the vision range of your avatar, who is teleporting, they're falling back just to initiate a teleport, you can probably close the distance in less than 2 seconds. Just by your basic like walking mobility. So, if anything, depending on how the balance goes, like it might actually be challenging if you're in an avatar v avatar duel to teleport out somehow. Okay, let's oh yeah, miscreant bounds and AI. I think that's everything that we would need technically. Oh, I need maps as well. Maps. Okay. Time to kill depends pretty heavily on the class. So there's item roles that give you a sort of, you inherit a role from the items that you have bought. And there are things called cores, which will dictate your visual appearance and also your initial stats. And that will kind of bias you in the direction of one of the roles, but it doesn't, you can just swap the core out for something else later if you want to. And you can also like start out with one core for damage or one core for something else, so some other utility, and then build like a completely different style onto it. So that's not going to be that controlling necessarily. So basically, if you wanted to if you actually wanted to deal a decent amount of damage, you would probably go for one of these first three classes, Nemesis, Massacre, or Firebrand. But Massacre is a bit more like wave clear and wide damage, like area denial. You could kind of think of it like a more involved, like if you know Brand from League of Legends, some stuff like that where it's like radial damage. I guess like there's going to be all sorts of stuff basically. These guys are going to have like multi-hit, like multi-attack weapons, or like weapons that fire off a bunch of different things. Like a bunch of at multiple targets at once or something, like the Minotaur in Cosmonarchy Brood War, where it has multiple targets. Nemesis is like more sort of mobile ADC from League, since it's biased initially towards sustained damage, but you can still spec into some more bursty stuff. Firebrand is a little bit more bursty, but it's also meant to be like artillery. So this is like high range, anti-building stuff. So these are your sort of like damage dealing roles, right? You've got like the one that's going to deal a lot of single target damage, the one that's going to deal pretty good AoE damage, and the one that's going to deal like base destruction, long range artillery damage. Then you've got, and as Knight of the Realm is already talking about in chat, these are just initial roles where an entire set of items or group of items falls into this category. And since you can mix and match whatever you want, you can cross-class, to use a term from Dungeons & Dragons, where you pick initially Nemesis and then spec into a bunch of items from the Iris brand, right? So in this case, we have something like combat chaos, info gathering, scouting, disruptive abilities and stuff that would be probably involving like slowing or rooting enemies, stuff like that. And I also don't know to what degree I'm going to involve a lot of like hard crowd control against other avatars. I'm not sure about that yet. I haven't thought about that deeply enough. But basically the idea is that like if you wanted to be super disruptive, you would go Iris, and it would be like giving your team a leg up in team fights, so to speak, based on the fact that you have the ability to like disrupt and fuck with the game plan, maybe slow down their Nemesis player. But if you wanted to grab a couple items that give you those abilities or give you those traits, like an Iris an Iris augment of some kind would probably give you like a slow on hit. And then a Massacre weapon would give you attack at least up to 5 targets at once. And so now you're slowing on hit up to 5 targets at once. You can see why that would be a good combo. So in some ways, you would be incentivized to focus on just a Nemesis build. Like there would be some arguments or some schools of thought that would say like, look, just double down on your shit, get that sustained damage, get like a really good amount of DPS and mobility, and maybe some lifesteal or whatever to keep yourself alive. And then there'd be other schools of thought that would be like, nuh-uh. In addition to doing that, you can also borrow some of this other shit from the other roles of items, the other classes of items, and, you know, sort of mix and match. So there'd be all sorts of stuff that would work in like that. Tyrant Shepherd could be some kind of necromancer character. Yeah, the Tyrant will definitely have a lot of different. So that's the other thing, is that these are almost overly simplistic the way that they're described, because, or maybe overly specific would be the way to describe it, because something like a Tyrant could come in the form of raising the dead, controlling the enemy, possessing units directly, like literally, like Banshee possession in Warcraft 3, or something more. What would another example of that be? But it would literally be like taking command of a unit and still having your items buff that unit up. So if you have an item for like a bonus health or something, so that would be like probably a Shepherd Tyrant or Architect Tyrant combo. Would be like you get defensive stats off of the Architect items, and then you get the possession branch of the Tyrant items, and now you can like significantly boost the defensive capabilities of a unit by possessing it, and then sort of abandon it, and there'd be like a channel time to the abandon. So if your unit that you're possessing dies, you count as dead as well. But that would be a really interesting combo. The other thing too is that architects can deploy like turrets and stuff. So if you wanted to go super in depth with this, you would deploy a turret and then possess that turret, and now you're like this ridiculously powerful turret. So that would be another thing that you could do. There's all sorts of wacky stuff that you'll be able to do with these combinations, which I think is going to allow you to always like, basically the idea that you'd be able to actually experience every possible combination, every meaningfully distinct possible combination of items, like you would need hundreds of hours, maybe more, in order to actually get access to that stuff. Because there's like, just like in Cosmonarchy Brood War, where I added a bunch of units to support longer game times, and just like Cosmonarchy Retail, where it's going to be like hundreds of units and all this other crazy shit, so that you can have 10 tiers of tech, and you can have like games that can last an hour and a half and you still haven't used all the units. In much the same way, if a game goes long, that just gives you opportunity to get a more ridiculous like item set, and eventually, you know, that's going to assist you in defeating your opponent, right? So I also have to figure out respawn systems. That's another thing I should add here. So I'll throw that in there. But yeah, there's going to be all sorts of interesting combinations you can do. I'm thinking for the respawning system, it'll be sort of like I'm trying to think of. There's a game, Cullen. There's a game that you and I played recently where this was the system, and I can't remember what it was. But basically, like somebody could hold on and wait for somebody else to revive them, and then alternatively they could just give up and then initiate the respawn. Was it that dumb robot game that I'm thinking of, where it was like an entirely empty game except for like 3 robots at a time? I think that might have been it. That might have been what it was. Yeah, I'd still want a physical form for all avatars, but the idea of basically being able to live through other people or whatever would make total sense in this context. I think it was that robot game that I'm thinking of anyway. But basically, that kind of respawn rule would make sense to me, where you have, like when you suffer fatal damage, you can be sort of captured and teleported back to the home base by an ally, and so you still have to reset back at your home base and maybe heal up over a certain amount of time. But it's a faster respawn than being regenerated by the obsidian or something. And so it would be the difference of like, I don't think the time would increase over as the game time goes on. This is like a weird controversial thing, but I actually feel like that just is too like overly punishing. It's a hand, what do you call it? The idea that you can like you increase respawn timers as the game goes on in a game like League is just like the developers saying, we can't figure out a way to make it so that you can close the game in a reasonable fashion with consistent rules. So we're just going to keep increasing the time until somebody doesn't respawn in time to defend their base. So, yeah, we might do Battle Royale style downs and deaths. At least the death system is kind of inheriting that, where it's like you still revive back at base, but you can be interacted with before the timer finishes. So the timer would, for your manual respawn, would instantaneously start ticking down when you die. And maybe that instant respawn takes 15 seconds, or maybe it's 30 seconds. It would be a flat time and it would never change. Maybe there would be like a really high tier item that would increase it or something, and that would be like a punish thing. But I don't know. Even that feels a bit dangerous conceptually. So it would be a flat time. It would always be the same thing. And your ally can speed the process up by like literally be standing on top of you for a certain amount of time. And like cut that time in half, or if they channel on top of you for 5 seconds, then you just immediately return back to base. So co-op games, you're thinking of being able to revive your buddy instantly once you achieve something like progress through the level or kills. Yeah, for a game like this where it's PvP and PvE or PvAI, I don't know that I would want that to be the case, but maybe it would be something like achieving like achieving a turret kill or something might do it. I don't know. It's a bit weirder though, because obviously the AI can just set up new outposts and stuff as the game goes on, right? So when you have like 100 turrets, like the equivalent, there's no such thing as like a dedicated lane where minions like single file walk down like in League, and there's turrets in pre-placed positions. Like there will be some pre-established outposts and stuff, but the AI will set up more of them and take the ones that it already has and increase their staffing and stuff. So it's harder for me to say like, here are the clear-cut examples where doing this gives you like the necessary info. So I think what we'll do is we'll just say for respawning, I'll just put this in the scratch pad for now, and we'll say flat 15 second. Timer on respawns accelerated if or instantly resolved if an allied avatar stands on channels for 5 seconds. On the corpse for 5 seconds. So this is like a way to sort of consolidate what I'm saying. I don't know about the down. I do kind of like the idea of going down and maybe being able to like crawl around Gears of War style or whatever, and be able to try and reposition. But I feel like that would just arbitrarily, like that would unnecessarily prolong 1v1s a lot and kind of morphs the game pretty heavily there. So I think we'll just stick with this basic stuff, and then if I want to try something else later, I can always implement it. Probably idle time, bro. And maybe I'll see you the next time you don't have a class. Volleyball! Owned by school. I have to go swap out my laundry and use the bathroom, so I will actually take a BRB as well. But when I come back, we will be diving into some of the item stuff. This roadmap makes sense to me. This doesn't include engine level stuff. This is entirely related to Onitar. So I will push what we have, what I've changed, and we'll just go from there. Oh yeah, we have a blank item section. Oops. All right, let me do that. Okay, we shall return momentarily. BRB. Something wacky going on with my stream deck here. Oh, I was just hitting the wrong one, I guess. Yeah, okay. That's my own dumb fault. All right. Made some progress there. Do I even want to click on this one? 1.0% stumble chance and weak point damage on hit. Jesus. So, items are the big deal here. So the first thing we need to do is specify like the inventory system, basically. Just make it a drink real quick. Obviously, one of the slots is going to be the core. And then I was thinking beyond that, we would probably want to take a page out of the book of like something like a Diablo. However, I have some thoughts, okay? I have some thoughts about how items are going to be done in this way that's going to be a bit different than maybe some of the other games that have used an actual inventory system actually are. So let's say inventory slots, right? So obviously I marked this as checked anyway, so I know what I'm going to be doing. So we're going to do primary hand, offhand. We're going to do core. We can do helmet, or we can just say, whoa, do head, and we'll do chest, cloak, legs, which will count feet. Now, this is our initial setup, which means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there are going to be some two-handed weapons, or two-handed, they won't all be weapons, but two-handed items. So, I think you'll see an inventory sort of like a smaller, like a sort of scaled down version of the inventory that you have in like maybe the bottom left corner or something. And your spells will probably be in the middle. And obviously you can customize all this shit. I don't see any reason to restrict UI customization from players. But it would be pretty similar, I guess, to World of Warcraft, where you learn talents and skills and stuff, and they show up in the bottom bar. I think that's how World of Warcraft does it. Like, you can have, like... I've seen screenshots and videos where it's like, there's like 30 fucking buttons there. So that'll be something like that. And you'll be able to, like, drag and drop and reorder, like, certain things. So if you like having your lightning strike spell on slot 2, and you get it like as your 5th ability, you can just quickly drag over it. But you can decide where you want your spell bar to be. Doesn't have to be any specific spot. So, yeah, League has obviously they know they only have 4 abilities, and passive and recall and summoner spells. So I think that's everything that's in there. Although it's funny because they don't only have 4 abilities, because now, like, you know, each ability is like 30 abilities at once or whatever, because they have grievously overloaded their champion pool. Anyway, we have core, primary hand, offhand, head, chest, cloak, legs. Now, there are going to be something that are called like augment slots, which are basically going to be items that are specifically designed to augment another item, in addition to whatever other stats they may have. So that means we have 2 glove slots, and each one of those gloves enhances the whatever's in the corresponding hand slot. So we have primary glove, off glove. We'll have pendant, which will be like necklace and stuff, and that'll enhance head. For chest, we have cloak. And then I'm not really sure what else we'll have. Like, I don't know if we'll have anything for legs. Like, I was thinking maybe a belt or something, but it's hard to see that, so probably not. Every single item that you have will be visually represented on your character. So, like how cores change your visual appearance, obviously if you have a weapon that's like a sword or a rifle, that should actually be visually distinguished as well, because that's going to impact which kind of character or what kind of attack you have. So, I was also thinking rings initially, Luciferius, but they're really hard to see. They're just going to be visual noise if you can notice anything different at all. And that's why I think, like, Veek had the idea of a cloak. So I basically think, like, this is all fine. I mean, maybe you could have, like, legs and then boots. And that would be the enchantment here, like boots enchant legs or something. If you wanted something like that. Well, the core is actually a more appropriate terminology, since it basically sets you, like, it gives you a lot of, like, basic stuff. Pants slot from Diablo 3. Yeah, I don't know. Some of this stuff does invoke imagery of more fantasy-oriented games, even though this is going to be more science fiction. But it'll be, I don't even think it'll be mostly science fiction, because there's going to be, like, it's going to be a real hodgepodge, probably. Yeah, you could call that, like, charm or spirit or something, yeah. As, like, a... I feel like that would probably be, like, a passive of another item, though. And, like, the item would basically have... So, then there's going to be, like... So we have inventory slots, right? And then we have, like, item flags, or we could call them traits. And then... Obviously, this would be something like... I kind of like the idea of calling it a harness, but then... Yeah, I don't know. I'll think about that, Chuck. So harness is a good suggestion. Curious, or however the fuck you're supposed to say that word. It's probably cuirass or something. I'll just look it up. Cuirass. No, never would have guessed that one. So the cuirass is a kind of armor. So you would imagine that would just be part of your chest or something, like a chest item. But okay, so items. There'll be traits. There will be item tiers, which we're all familiar with the concept, right? So there'll be... I'll have, like, probably more interesting names for these eventually, but we know that there's going to be, like... It's a common. We'll say conventional items that are purchased from shops and dropped from low-tier enemies. I forget what we do for underlining. I think it's double italics, but I can't remember. Let me find another case where I underlined something. Have I ever underlined anything ever? I guess not. Obviously, links don't count. Maybe in... Oops, that's not what I wanted. No. I guess I can update the Antikythera page, though. Sup, Milestone? It's updated on my end. YouTube chat specifically lags for some reason. Oh, yeah. Your other... Oh, actually, yeah. Some messages didn't show up. I guess it's probably just the relay went down very briefly or something. D2 had much better concepts for auras and stuff like that. It's where the auras came from anyway. Can you elaborate, Shocks? If you want all this to be visible, I guess the characters need to be pretty big. I'd go for something even bigger than what Diablo 2 has, considering its screen-to-character ratio. Well, we have plans to basically make it so that the avatars are 3D as opposed to 2D. I talked with Veek about the technicals about that. The only concern I have visually is whether or not we'll be able to completely remove clipping from the equation, because obviously that's something I don't want to have in my game. So we'll have to think about that. But basically, the animations will be like I don't know about physics simulations, which would help the cloaks, for example, not clip. Everything else can be done via animations and then correct proportional modeling and stuff. Markdown doesn't normally have underline milestone, but we have our own website engine. Antikythera actually does the website stuff. I forget what the custom syntax was, though. That's what I was struggling to remember. And that's why I was like trolling through some pages here, trying to figure out where I last used italics. Oh, here we go. Contextual orders. Let's take a look at it. Oh, it's just one set of underlines. Okay. Normally that's italics, but whatever. The avatar needs to be 3D because we need to have interpolation between animations, and we need to have scaling, and we need to have a bunch of other things that are just not... it's not sensible. It doesn't scale with a 2D environment where you would have to render every single thing, every single item for every single combination of other items that might be on the person, that might offset some aspects of it. And then you would also need to re-render the avatar base mesh every single time for holding every single combination of items. Like, it's just a nightmare. So it's not going to impact performance. Veek has told me he doesn't believe it'll impact performance because we're rendering like avatar plus maybe 11 items max. So it'd be like 12 items per player. or per avatar, because there's going to be AI avatars. So I would expect it would be like less than 120, 150 items, which is like really baby numbers for most 3D games. So it's not supposed to actually negatively impact the game's anything about the game, basically. That's what I've been told. It's not full 3D. Everything else is 2D. Literally, only the avatars are 3D. Diablo 2 had composited weapons, but they weren't actually visually distinct besides maybe some like particles or whatever. Like I don't believe they had more than a few models of swords, and those models were obviously like they used the same animations, so I don't know anything about Underrail, but what am I doing looking at this anyway? Holy fire periodically hit nearby enemies with a blast of fire. Thorns returns damage. Yeah, yeah. Their entire UI is so fucked. Like shit that just completely clashes with the art style. Wow, it's almost like an actual wiki now. I only had to hide fucking 5 elements. I can get rid of this too. Modern web dev in shambles. This is still fucked, but whatever, I don't care. Alright, now I can read. That would be pretty satisfying. I don't know what attack rating does. Percentage chance you will hit the target. Okay, fuck you. Can I block this pop-up? Hell yeah, brother. Yeah, they'll remain hidden no matter how many times I come back to this page. If I want to disable it, I'll have to go into settings or something. I forget how to do that. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. I'll never use this site, so I only will use it when Chox links me to stuff. Oh, here we go. This is a classic site, by the looks of it. Can I use more than one aura at the same time? I can imagine, like, some pretty high-tier stuff that's, like, it would be stuff like healing, like, giving lifesteal to allies or something. There'll be all sorts of wild stuff. There'll even be things that are, like, super transformative, where, like, if you get an enchantment item, like a glove or a cloak or something, it might morph whatever the, like, if there's a passive on the item it's enhancing, then that turns into an aura instead of like only something that affects you. Like it might like half effectiveness for everybody in your area or something. Just as an idea. There's gonna be all sorts of stuff like that. So, but yeah, the auras or really anything, nothing really has to be very complex. So. Provide limited stat bonuses. Yeah, displaying exact gear is the main reason why I want to do that. Because I want a unique model for every single item in the game, which means, and that's for readability's purposes. Like, I need the items to be visibly understandable so that you can look at it and say, like, at least estimate the combat effectiveness and capabilities of a particular enemy. Some things might not need to be 3D about the items or whatever, like the spirit that follows you around if you have like an enchanted possessed item or something, like maybe that doesn't need to be massively you know, doesn't need to be 3D necessarily. It could just spin around your unit or whatever. But the core concern for me coming into it was, does this affect performance negatively? Like, is this going to negatively impact performance? Is this going to is it going to actually solve the problem? Like, will we still have an issue down the line? And from our initial foray into the idea, the only issue that seems to be likely is like whether or not we can get physics simulations implemented without it being too non-performant. But I think even for that, it probably won't be that big of a deal. No, it'll be the same visual art style as everything else. Ideally, you won't notice that it's a 3D model, basically. Like, ideally, it'll look like everything else. I think lighting might be a concern that we have in terms of, like, if we're going to have real-time lighting. We might not have that as a feature in Onitar. I'm not sure yet. But, yeah, it's literally just going to... It will look like... I mean, it'll be... We're going to have models for all of the 2D arts as well. They're just rendered. So, it'll look like that, ideally. Since it's sci-fi / fantasy hybrid setting with a lot of emphasis on high-tech stuff, like you're walking around serving an AI commander called an Obsidian, so it's very much like rooted in science fiction. Because that's the case, we will probably have a more futuristic vibe to a lot of stuff, similar-ish to StarCraft, maybe a bit brighter. I'm not sure yet. I think there will be it'll depend on also which faction you're playing in service of and stuff like that. Ideally, you'll be able to customize your appearance to some minor degree, like picking a favored base model. That will maybe introduce some readability issues for players who haven't seen specific base models before, but hopefully the weaponry and the items being consistent, no matter what your base model is, will be enough of a readability boost, if you will. Well, you can finish the waylay anyway, and I'll see what I can come up with as far as other concepts. Progress on Cosmonarchy or on Xibalba stuff is not something I don't want, necessarily. It would still be helpful, so... Really, the only reason why we're doing this is so that we can release a game next year, which will hopefully fund our efforts and help us find actual modelers and stuff, like more art people, basically. Because it is unreasonable to just say, "Hey, DF, want to model 2,000 units?" Not very reasonable. Not very reasonable. Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm not worried about like time. I'm not worried about like cracking the whip on you or anything. So don't worry about that. Yeah, that's just because the widget that I have doesn't take into account whether or not you have permissions to see something, which is pretty annoying. I don't actually have any of his work posted there, though. I don't think. I think I just have the textual descriptions. I did forget about that. Yeah. Oh, this is supposed to be here. Yeah, that would be like a trait as opposed to a tier. Although, um, there is going to be like a. I guess this would be a trait as well. This would be. Trying to think of a term for this. Oops. Almost dropped my term device. Also known as my phone. Onitar, by the way, doesn't mean anything as far as I know. It's just a really epic trisyllabic word that I invented while listening to some music. That's I think I've probably talked about this before on different streams, but I'll listen to music and then just write down shit from the lyrics or from the stuff that I think about downstream of the lyrics or downstream of the combination of sounds and visuals in my head. Well, the word I'm actually looking for describes the fact that the item is part of a set. But yeah, singular could be it. We'll use that for now. Now, isolated is going to mean something different, isn't it? Yeah, we'll go with singular for now on, I suppose. Maybe it'll change. I guess we could just say an item with no duplicates. I actually forget what the term was for pauldrons or shoulders. What is the term for because greaves are like boots specifically, right? Armor of the shin. Okay. Okay, I guess greaves are fine then. So these are the 4 tiers I've got right now. We'll see if that ends up getting any extra shit. But for now, Potent and Ascendant are where you're going to have items that provide you with abilities. And if something is common or masterwork, and maybe there will be something in between there, that's where you will get strictly stat bonuses from common items. Passives can also come from masterwork. So I guess maybe there will be one that specifically just gives you passives in addition to stat bonuses, and so not actives. There might be something like that, which is basically like a tier above common, but below potent. So I'll think about what that might be called or whether or not we even need that. There's going to be more traits than this, though, for item traits. Might be using a different term for this eventually, but this will be I don't know how many items will ever have that, if this is even something I want, but I figured I would throw it in there. I guess it would be that would be a better term for it. So we know we have items here, item classes. So we've done that. Inventory, traits and tiers. Trying to think about what else we might have coming, but I guess for now we will ship the changes to the site. Okay. Oh, I need to synchronize the formatting here. There we go. So there's definitely going to be more traits than what we have. Might be one more tier between common and potent, as discussed. I think these classes are probably fine. I can't think of anything else we would want. And the only thing that I'm thinking is that maybe we need something more designed around tanking, but I think that can also be Shepherd. Like a Shepherd Architect combo would be really good for tanking and disrupting enemies and enchanting allies. Well, I guess if you wanted to be a disruptive tank, you would do like Shepherd Iris. If you wanted to be an enchanting tank or a supportive tank, you'd be like Shepherd Architect. And then if you wanted to be like a bruiser, it would be like probably like Massacre Architect or maybe even Firebrand Architect, something like that. I know there's going to be like an item that grants an ability where you clone your attack onto a target ally for an architect item at some point. So that would obviously make sense to include. Which means if you have a really powerful attack, then it kind of feeds off of that. So you could imagine like a Firebrand Architect combination where you've got a really long range, high damage attack, and you clone that onto some turrets that you deploy. That would obviously be very powerful. There's a lot of potential for stuff like that. Had to message Veek about something. So I think I talked about this some time ago with the Dreamhold concepts, but basically the tech map that I have here. This is a bad example. We'll do this tech map. So the Ansivi tech map, for example, I would want one of these for the items. In fact, I would want like a tech map that basically shows items of different tiers. So like obviously tier 1 would be common, tier and then, you know, they'd be like subdivided. So like probably by price, they'd be listed by price. So like as an example, if like you have a common item, it would be in the where tier 1 is, and if it was below 1,000 ash to purchase, it would, or worth 1,000 ash or less, then or I guess 999 or less, it would be on the top half, and then above that would be below, you know, the bottom half or whatever. If it's 1,000 or more, it would be below. Stuff like that, and then maybe there's like other breakpoints or whatever. And there'd be one of these like categories for each item class that we have. So there'd be like Nemesis and Massacre and Firebrand and so on. I think that would be a really intuitive way to sort the items, because then you have Common, and then you have Potent and Masterwork and Ascendant, and then maybe whatever else if we decide to add another tier. Or another tier. And then when you click on it, it would say like, oh, you know, this is a God-touched item. And then it would show you like the rest of the items in the set. Similar to how like it shows you like enables or successor or whatever here. It would be like part of set, and then the set name, and then like all the other items that are involved. Stuff like that. Plus it would also tell you like instead of cost and stats or whatever, like obviously there'd be the ash cost or the how much it's worth. And then you'd have like the stats that it actually does, it gives you. And this is basically like could be like a wiki for the items themselves in a way. So I just feel like that would be pretty intuitive. Make a lot of sense to try to go for. So we haven't conceived of every item in existence, obviously, but I think we've done a pretty good amount of work on like the core basis for some of these items. These 3 sections for factions, personalities for the Obsidians, which is going to be the easiest one, and then like miscreant bands, those are not going to be that difficult to implement or to come up with conceptually. But I'm also kind of leaving like stuff that's specific to this setting that Onitar has. I'm leaving some of that for later, because the demo is not going to be set in the same setting anyway. So I'm not really that worried about it. Target number of items a player can purchase at the start. Would you allow getting enough spells to make the game action-filled instantly? So yes, I mean, right. So like what the avatars actually have at the beginning of the game, they have teleport ability, right? Which we're all familiar with by now. That's something that we had written in the scratch pad. Teleportation. Avatars can teleport to any completed allied structure, 2-second channel, interrupted by taking damage or being issued a new order. And they obviously have high base mobility and become faster via item bonuses. So mobility and teleportation, those fields of avatar traits, are pretty important for me, because they basically mean that we have the... you instantly have the opportunity to sort of deploy at one of the forward posts and fight. So I don't know if you've read the game flow, Knight of the Realm, but basically this is like a 30-second... I'm actually not sure how long it might be. It might be 20 seconds instead of 30, because 30 is a bit long. But basically, you'll deploy... you're contained in a starting zone. So this would be like... So let me look up a map of League of Legends map. I just do this, go to images. So, right, this is the map that we have. So if I just open up Paint, and then... So normally you're contained in like a pretty... You're just contained here. Let me just increase my size so you can see that. Like normally, this is where you're contained. In the fountain, right? So in Onitar, it would be more like you're contained here at the beginning. Not that it really matters that much, But the reason being is because instead of like the item shop being only over here, like it'd be like if we draw a green circle, like this would probably be the radius you can buy items from. And then if we draw a brown circle, there'd be like a bounty board here or something, because they're attached to town centers. And so like this isn't the exact map, obviously, but this is like rough quadrants. And so you would want the ability to sort of move around. And then say like outposts, maybe there's only like, there's an outpost here and your enemy has an outpost here. And so this gives you like, okay, these are the two areas that I can instantly teleport to. But then over here, let me use like blue or something. Over here, there's like an extra area where there's like an expansion that your ally wants to take eventually. And so you can choose as a team to like group up and ignore the middle of the map entirely and like go attack here. And this would be like held by some neutrals. Or you can like have some players do that, and then like some other players will like go scout the enemy and see what they're doing. And then, you know, you'll get stuff like this. And then there's going to be more than one outpost probably per map. But the idea is that like you can choose to engage, but that's only one of the choices that you have. And the meta would probably develop in that insofar as you would want like an Iris player, a player that begins with an Iris core, or maybe a Nemesis core, to do some scouting. And like, you know how in CSGO, or not in CSGO, in League of Legends, you have this thing called invades where you go into the enemy jungle and try to like stop them from having a comfortable beginning to the game. So the meta would probably develop that you could do an invade, but it could be risky if there's an enemy Iris who's also in the same area and they're sort of like they see you before you see them kind of thing. You might do like an Iris and a Nemesis player both together, moving as like a unit, as a pair, and the Iris like sort of feigns that it's the only one there, but the Nemesis is lying in the brush somewhere maybe, or whatever. And then like the Nemesis tries to steal an enemy neutral camp, or something to that effect, or like just to sort of sabotage the enemy somehow. So there's all sorts of stuff that could happen. But basically the idea is that we have more choices for you to make initially. So I don't like the jungle system in League. I feel like it's really dumb because the enemies that you fight in the jungle are docile, they leash, they are never active on the map. Their radiuses for actually getting angry at you in the first place. Like you can walk right up to them basically and nothing happens. Like it's they feel very flaccid. They feel like they don't exist on the map. And they are just there basically as padding for the time so that you have something to do as a jungler or whatever in the early game. And so I don't want that to be the case. If you wanted to take the fight to the enemy immediately and force a reaction, then you might do a situation where you have, like, say it's a 3v3 map, or a situation where you only have two people even, and you choose to go to the middle of the map and fight. That might be what you actually do in a game, and say, we just want to get like an early victory against this person's stuff. Let's force their hand. That could be something that you do. And alternatively, you could engage with miscreant enemies, which are the neutrals, that actually do want to live and will fight you. And, you need some coordination. It would be like a raid boss almost, except not as involved, not with 40 fucking people or whatever. But it would be something where there is actually challenge to the example, right? There's challenge in the interaction. And so it is actually going to copy your, it's going to call for you to actually play the game, even if you're playing against enemies that are not controlled by players, or are not avatars. You're still doing something for a reason to forward your goals beyond leveling up or getting in-game currency to spend on items. There's no leveling system in Onitar, and the items obviously are something that you do want to have access to, but you're going to get those anyway. So we haven't talked about like how we plan to do resources. So I guess we should do that, because I already know what I'm going to do with those. So let's do avatars. We'll also do the classic. This section is not yet complete. What's up, Vic? Yeah, I was just showing Alexander what the early game would look like, basically. So for maybe 20 or 30 seconds, you're contained inside your starting zone, and you're deployed near a monolith. And so the example I gave is that like the item shop is attached to a monolith, and the bounty board is attached to a town center. You can get a bounty board. You can pick up a bounty from any town center, and so the more town centers, maybe the more bounties. I haven't decided that yet, but the idea is that like the brown circle would be like the radius for bounties, and then the green circle would be the radius for items. And so you would also have freedom of movement, even though you have teleportation to these black circles, depending on which team you're at. You can instantly teleport here, but maybe there's something more localized that you would want to do here. And maybe you wouldn't want to teleport here because you want to stealthily scout or something like that. So you have the opportunity to do all those things. I don't think I need to keep this open anymore, though. So that's the only reason why I had that open. But obviously, NetherRealm's initial question was like, what kind of things can you do at the beginning of the game? Specifically, how many items can you have? Or whatever. So cores will always give you at least one ability, I think. They might give you two. And those abilities would be, you know, fairly cookie cutter initially, because they are like literally, you have access to, I don't know. Okay, this is the other question is like, I don't know if we have multiple cores from the get-go. Like, do you have a burst Nemesis core versus a sustained Nemesis core or something like that? Or do you just have the Nemesis core, the very basic one, and it gives you, so everybody who specs into Nemesis at the beginning of the game has access to the same abilities, and there is no like disparity of like, I picked a burst Nemesis and you picked a, you know, sustained Nemesis, so we have different, you know, abilities. I think that would probably lead to more exciting gameplay and more variety and more player choice. I kind of see cores as a replacement for like runes and masteries in a game like League, and also a limited replacement for just picking a specific champion as well. So it gives you base stats, and it gives you some abilities, and probably a passive or two, and obviously a weapon. Well, it doesn't give you a weapon, but it gives you like some sort of basic element there, like some base stats and the abilities and passives. Now, some abilities go through your weapon, and some abilities go through a different piece of equipment that you have. So, for example, like Nemesis and Massacre and Firebrand cores are going to give you abilities which will require a weapon. So there will be like a cookie cutter sort of recommended set for initial purchases, and for first time players, they'll probably want to use those. And that would be like, say, a sustained Nemesis core and a mid-range weapon, like a rifle or something. And you'd have access to the, like, you'd have the ability to buy like the core, and then you'd have the ability to buy the rest of the items or whatever. I don't know how many items you would get or what all they would do. Like, you'd probably have the core, which could be considered like a, if we go back to the item tier, the core is kind of like in a way, the core is kind of like an ascendant item in that it gives you stat bonuses, abilities, and passives, because it gives you a little bit of everything. But it would be like, that's just the kind of thing that it does. Like it's the only item that is guaranteed to give you stats, passives, and abilities, no matter what kind of, like, what tier it is. So it kind of exists outside this tier system in a way, which is a little bit regrettable. But basically that means a common core is going to give you something different than maybe a masterwork core or an ascendant core. Like, there might be more tiers of cores. I haven't decided that yet. But probably there will be. So I think what will happen is you'll buy a core, a weapon, and then some other item based on what you want. And even the weapons that you can buy are, like, you're probably only going to be able to afford common weapons at the beginning once you purchase your core. So you'll probably want a common weapon, maybe two common weapons, like maybe akimbo pistols or something you could imagine, or maybe an offhand. And maybe some players will also opt for like fast boots or something that improve their movement speed or something to that effect. Depending on what they're actually doing. Like, an Iris player is going to get more movement speed from their core, just like a Nemesis player will get a bit more movement speed from their core. And then you'd also want, like, on top of that, if you're planning on scouting, you might want to go grab some boots. And the other thing is, since items can be sold for full value, you can do like a movement speed oriented opener with the Iris, and then find your information, teleport back, sell your shit, buy something else. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. There won't be cooldowns. That's kind of an obvious thing if you've been following the stuff that I've been doing design-wise. But mana or whatever the secondary resource is, energy, will be the cooldown, so to speak. which is going to introduce some interesting things. Basically, anything that increases your max energy is going to be a very, like, it's going to be a coveted item. Because of the fact that increasing your energy or your energy regeneration or an item that like gives you energy back is obviously going to be really important if you have a lot of like very powerful abilities that are would otherwise be gated by energy. It probably just means that I'm designing abilities to be fired off very frequently though, because I'm removing the cooldown, obviously. So the cooldown might take there might be a global cooldown in the sense that like it wouldn't even be global, but it would be applicable to every single thing. So abilities that go through your weapon would be considered an attack, and thus your attack speed would scale the effective cooldown. So basically, like casting a spell twice that goes through your weapon would be akin to right-clicking twice. Like it's not going to make you attack faster. So that's like an example of what would happen. Yeah, energy in League was definitely really bizarre. Okay, so we're gonna do let's move the respawn stuff over here, and then let's do move these up as well, and we'll start documenting these a little bit more formally. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking as well that there might be like number of attacks you can fire off before a cooldown takes into effect. So there would be like a basic delay between, like, say you have a rifle. Like the obvious example is just reloading. So the rifle has a rate of fire, which is the built-in delay between individual attacks. And then at some point, maybe you have like 10 attacks in your clip, and you have to reload. And so the reload is like the more elaborate timer. And then your unit would just reload if it was ever given an order that isn't attack. It would start to reload. Which means, I guess that's sort of like Graves in League of Legends. He has got something that kind of works the same way. And he has like an ability where he dashes and instantly reloads a shot, which is a bit weird. But I'm not sure how that'll like all work, but that could be one idea if we wanted to have more bursty characters or whatever, or more bursty weapons, I should say. Whereas like a sword, it'll just have like a wind up before you can attack again, right? Because he's literally swinging a sword, so it's a little bit more intuitive there. But if it's just a gun, or it's like a wand or something, Harry Potter style. Oh yeah, Jin also had that. And obviously there will be like, you can have there could be like a glove slot that enchants your rifle to give it an extended magazine or something. You know, that could be something that would happen. Thanks. So I think I will go with 15-second timer for now, and we'll just iterate on that time later. I forgot about Coca-Cola. Jesus. Yeah, I do that a lot with behaviors in Cosmonarchy Brood War, even where like the Madcap passive starts to decay when they move, but then there's I think the Heracles passive. It behaves like you're describing. I go to Cosmonarchy Brood War, and I go to Terran, and I go to upgraded Ahmed. Here he is. This bonus falls off after not attacking for 5 seconds. That's an example. So I do stuff like that for passive effects all the time. I can't remember if there's some active ability in Cosmonarchy Brood War that gives you a buff that expires only after being out of combat. That would be an interesting thing to do for the Matroleth ensnaring brood behavior. Because right now it lasts for 12 seconds. But imagine if it expired after 2 seconds of not attacking. Would maybe a little bit more, like if you kite them, then it falls off faster. That could be interesting. Maybe even an upgrade, since it's not just a flat timer on an active ability. Yeah, because a lot of the times if it's a consumable item, I guess that's another thing that we should discuss, whether we want consumable items or not. I feel like they end up feeling a bit wonky in that consumable items feel a bit wonky to me in that they in MOBAs they tend to basically like you activate them before a fight and you just passively gain HP regen. Maybe that's not really that big of a deal, but it always felt weird to me. And also, obviously, like kind of morphed the engagements that you had. Yeah, like the stacks would fall off Night of the Realm, you're right. Instead of it just vanishing entirely. Although the fall off would be pretty rapid, I think. So it'd probably be over the time span of like a second. Yeah, so like the health potion equivalent that does the same sort of thing like a health potion would just be an item ability. But what I'm mostly wondering is like the effect that a consumable has in a game like League of Legends or Dota 2. I'm not sure if that's a positive effect. Like I'm not sure if I actually like that effect. But having a slow sustained heal is probably fine. I think it would be more interesting if you had if like an early game item gave you very minor lifesteal, or whoever you cast the buff on received minor lifesteal. Well, consumable skills could be something like returning back home refills your charges, since you'd be teleporting to, like if you're near a town center, you resupply or something. If you wanted something like that, it would add value to drawing out team fights or duels with whoever had that kind of equipment, and kind of bias whoever has that equipment in favor of resolving skirmishes quickly. Or quicker than their charges run out. So it could work. The question is whether or not it would be super epic. So I guess we can do charged. We'll do finite. Provides an ability or effect that has limited uses with charges being refilled when near an allied town center. I think that's fine. Well, I think Night of the Realm was talking about stuff like staff. Like there was stuff like that in the Rexar campaign, I think, where it would be like, click this item to cast this spell, but it only has 4 charges. They had like some sort of ancestral totem or something that summoned 2 trolls out of fucking thin air, which was pretty embarrassing. And then there's like there's probably like a Finger of Pain item or something. Well, I don't think that was charged actually. Now that I think about it, but. But yeah, Veek, I was talking earlier about the oh, I need to add fucking that again. Ranked. I was talking earlier about the idea of having an item list that would work for similar to the tech maps. And I was talking about how you'd have like a category for each item class, like Nemesis, Firebrand, Massacre, and so on. And then the tiers would be like Common, Potent, Masterwork, Ascendant. And then in here, there would be you'd have these like little horizontal lines that would separate different orders of items, and those orders would basically, I would manually configure them, but it would basically be like the thresholds would basically be price. So this costs 750 ash, so it's in the first order. And this costs 1500 ash, so it's in the second order, and so on. And that would be a nice little intuitive way where you're sorting by price, but also by category and by tier. Be pretty useful, I think. And we would need an opportunity to have something like an item set field. I guess you'd want to be able to sort items by which stats they provide. We don't need to worry about like really complicated stuff like we don't need to worry about like having icons for everything. Realistically speaking, we can just have plain text fields that allow me to enter into like, literally it would look like, you know, plus 5 damage, plus 10 movement speed, like entering it in like this, and it would display that way too. I think that would be fine. The icons probably will be will need to be smaller, but we can work on those later. I suppose that could be like a configurable flag inside the PHP file for items or whatever, if we wanted it to be. Items have passives, but if you consume all the charges, the item is gone, you lose everything. Yeah. It should just become a 0 charge item that you, like, turn into a non-active item at that point. That's like the obvious thing that you would want. But that's too complicated for Lard. They don't know what to do about that. Yeah, I basically have I have an enhancement for every slot besides the core, which kind of exists outside of the standard paradigm for reasons discussed earlier. I definitely think we'll have more than one. Thinking about it now, I think it makes a lot of sense to have more than one core based on your category. So having a basic Nemesis core, having like 2 or 3 options from the word go, you know you want to be a Nemesis. You know your team needs damage, so you're going to opt for the Nemesis class initially. But do you know which specific core you want? Do you want the more like the general, the safe option where it's like sustaining stuff, or are you going to go partner up with somebody else? Like how exactly is that going to work? So so this is killing an enemy supplicant gives you a quarter of that enemy's value in ash. I guess we won't bother capitalizing it. Destroying enemy structures. Leveling an enemy structure, but only 1 L here, I guess so. Gives you all of that enemy's value in ash. Structure. Not sure about the specific rules here. We might change the ratios or whatever after testing. Set bonuses are only going to be attached to God-touched items, and God-touched items are going to be very rare. So when you get a set bonus, it'll be like fucking like equipment used by some legendary warrior, and it's like most of it is lost, but you've managed to uncover it or whatever. The thing is, like, God-touched items are going to be really fucking powerful anyway, so they will always be valuable. But you're right that you would have, if you already have one of set A, you would want another of set A if possible. And that's why, like, looking at the bounties is going to be important. And making sure that we have an easy way to instantly look at the bounty and say, this is what I want, or whatever. That's pretty good, too. So making sure that the bounties are readable just by looking at them. I don't actually know if there will be a flat bonus. I think Basically, I think you'll drop unspent ash on death, which will add more value to finding a way to go home and spend the money, basically. So these are some basic ways. I don't actually know if we want a passive gain, but I do feel like without a passive gain, you like there's such a thing as not having enough comeback mechanics, basically. And if you just keep getting owned and you lose all of your ash, that is actually a really big potential issue. I don't really think it's that big of a deal because you can teleport in 2 seconds. So if you can't figure out a way to escape, or have your backpack guarded by a teammate, there's also the potential for you to die when you're not even near an enemy avatar. So, I think we'll work with it, and if it doesn't work, then we'll see what happens. So obviously this last part, if it was going to be a passive portion, means that if you let your ally expand, then you get a little bit of that as well over time. It's like an investment thing. So that has a potential to run away, but I don't know. We'll see. Also means you want to protect those fucking workers, boy. I think we test 100% just because if it works out, it's actually very clean. But yeah, we can always pivot to half. Let's get bounties and bounty boards. I've already done that. Okay. These have not been documented yet. I'm basically deleting shit from the scratch pad that I've actively documented elsewhere, so. So we have some pretty interesting stuff going on for bounties, I think. First of all, you have to purchase them in order to go, like, actually have access to them in the first place. I think you'll be able to collect the items necessary, because basically it'll be like, destroy this enemy, and I'm not sure if you'll need to have access to the bounty in order to collect the loot necessary for it. So it would be something like, this bounty calls for the, like a certain trophy, but you can pick up trophies from enemies, right? So that'll be something else that I should mention here is high-level supplicants will drop trophies, which can be sold at item shops. There we go. So this basically means that, like, bounties call for trophies and other unequipable items to before they can be turned in. I think we'll leave it at this level of complexity for now. So obviously avatars are also going to drop trophies, which is how you'll get most of the money from killing them. In addition to whatever ash they may have and items they may have. Starting to get a better, more complete picture of where this is all going to go, which is pretty cool. Oh, that's even a fucking great. Allied item shops are attached to allied monoliths. Neutral item shops are scattered throughout the map and often hold more Expensive and powerful items. Should be fine. Not sure about this last part. That might change. Trying to think of how to phrase this. Item sets have one item per inventory slot. Contain one item per inventory slot. More than 2 items of the same set do not bestow additional. Okay. So obviously we haven't actually conceived of literal items, but we've definitely done a lot of work expanding out the like the way that this stuff works. I still need a section on obsidians and supplicants and miscreants. So these last 3 things in the scratch pad are sort of like the next things that I work on, as well as map elements that are going to be more map specific, which would be like neutral item shops, and then maybe other elements, right? So there's still some stuff that I've got to do. I'll add the say map specific elements. This will be like neutral item shops, conduits with auras, other strategically notable, and other strategically notable. I guess. So, I think that pretty much brings our stream to a close for now. How long was I going for? About 2.5 hours ain't bad. We've obviously been spending a good amount of time just in conceptual spaces for now, and I think that's fine. I will continue adding more shit as it comes up, but the exciting part for me is that even though I still have to add these sections from the scratchpad into something a little bit more formal, this is basic. Everything that you see listed here is the game. Like, it doesn't get more complicated than this. The depth of mechanics or the depth of systems is not going to go deeper than this. Really, what's going to add depth to the gameplay and to the experience is the massive number of choices that this framework allows for, which I think is pretty exciting. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that shit. And, Vik and I will continue working on the technicals and seeing what we can do for that demo that's coming out in late January. And that'll be it. Stream out, homies. Thanks for hanging. Bye.